Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Sussman, the editor of Willamette Week. I'm thrilled to be here with Rukaiyah Adams. It's Wednesday at 4:15. Rukaiyah has agreed to share a few minutes of time and talk a little bit about how she's occupying herself during sheltering in place. Uh, you've been at home. You're in Portland. You live in Southwest Portland?
South in Fulton Park.
In
Yeah.
Fulton Park. And you have someone who you're sheltering in place with?
My husband, David Chen, who is not the Equilibrium David Chen. He's a different David Chen.
You probably have to answer that question quite a bit.
He does.
And I'm just, how's it going? Are you learning how to cook? Are you wearing a mask when you go outside, or have you increased your video chat? I mean, how are you adjusting to this kind of lifestyle?
Well, the first 2 weeks I didn't adjust very well. I think I felt like a caged animal inside the house. I'm a runner, so it's been tough not to be able to just get out and run and be outside. But I've been working 14-hour days, and I spend most of my time in this kind of hazy, bright room trying to do the work. So it's been okay. We have enough space that I have a room dedicated to working. Not eating more, probably drinking a bit more wine.
You were telling me earlier your secret for staying sane is your biking indoors.
Yes. So as a runner, I do go on runs late in the evening or early in the mornings if I can get them in. But the markets have been so crazy that my mornings are usually thrown out of whack. But I have taken up indoor cycling. My friend Jesse Dooley from Burn Cycle laid down a challenge for me to learn to cycle and get acclimated so that as we come out of these quarantine days, I'll be able to join her in an actual class at Zoom Cycle, or at Burn Cycle. But I'd been afraid in the past because I thought I couldn't handle the bike, that there wasn't a middle-aged lady class. Maybe I wasn't strong enough. So I'm spending this time learning how to cycle.
I've got to ask you one silly question that we're asking everybody, which is, during quarantine, have you discovered Tiger King?
I have, man. Hey, good morning. What was it? Good morning, cool cats and kittens. Carol Baskin, yo, she's no joke.
So
I watched it all. I've watched it all. My husband didn't like it very much. He left after 2 episodes and gave up on it, but I did watch it.
Your job has been, and your volunteer work has been, on behalf of the Oregon Investment Council, to invest and make decisions about the economy and where it's headed. Can you give us, from your perspective, what we're facing in Oregon over the next year?
Sure. So I will say that I turned off of the Investment Council a month before the markets went down. So I feel like I left with a 3-run homer, and holy crap, the world just suddenly changed. But there are a number of global issues, but bringing some of the consequences down to the local level. The thing that I do in investing is we try to look out over the very long term. And in this case, long term is probably 24 to 48 months out. And the thing that I hope we focus on is the tax consequences of this quarantine period and the response to it, after the quarantine is over. The state of Oregon primarily is funded by income tax, right, or commercial taxes. And if we actually do experience a 25% unemployment rate, the consequences to the state revenues will be profound, right? Everything from gas taxes to income taxes, all of the taxes or revenue that's driven by economic activity and movement will decline, and they'll decline drastically in ways that none of our models anticipated. And that doesn't even speak to what happened in the pension plan assets over the last few weeks. So I think this outcome will force us to really think about our form of taxation. I know we've had these conversations about whether we should revisit the tax structure, whether we should consider a sales tax, whether we should rethink how we fund schools. But this fight that we're having right now about whether or not the most recent measure to fund education should happen or be delayed. Or, to me, that's kind of a crazy conversation to be having, and that we might need to diversify our tax revenue in order to provide a more steady revenue source for our key programs in the state. So I would say the thing that I see coming out of this for the state of Oregon, um, 36 to 48 months out, is a pretty sober conversation about our tax structure and how we can bear these kinds of discontinuities in business and in life without materially harming children, our transportation systems that will be required to jumpstart our economy, without impairing public safety and a number of other functions that our state government provides.
Rukaiyah, if you had a guess, what will the unemployment rate be in January of 2021 in Oregon?
Well, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine an unemployment rate at 25%, which is the worst case scenario that we've been seeing. But one of the things that makes Oregon unique is also the thing that makes us really vulnerable in this situation. All of the small businesses, all of the creative industries, the restaurants, all of those things that make us so unique and create the lifestyle that we like are also highly vulnerable to these kinds of fluctuations. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hit the 15 to 20% number. I don't know when it will happen, but the consequences of that, again, the follow-on consequences are pretty serious, right? So in addition to the income tax consequence, we'll have residential leases and defaults that may cause some issues with mortgages, and mom and pop owners of multifamily units, those folks who last year were fighting with city council about unreinforced masonry buildings. Those people who own those buildings are really going to struggle. And it's not all big businesses, right, or REITs that own these properties. So to me, the follow-on consequences are going to require excellent policymaking and a sober view of where the second and third tier consequences of unemployment will be. So I think we'll be in the 15% range. I'm not sure about that, but my guess is we'll be relatively high just because of our lifestyle and what we value here. And some of it is a part of our frontier culture. We really like small businesses. We like to set out and build things on our own. But in these times when the safety net and some of the larger, the protection of larger institutions are a benefit, we're a little bit more vulnerable than other places, right? People say we've lost a lot of our Fortune 500 companies. All those things that create massive protection and structures to help employees, we don't have anymore. For better, it makes us more interesting, makes us more creative, it makes us more nimble and flexible. But in times like this, it also makes it more difficult to coordinate response.
In trying to find some silver lining to this cloud we're all enduring, that the fact that all of us are changing our behavior for reasons that are other than selfish, the point made by, I don't know, the Surgeon General or someone today said, when you can convince someone to stop smoking cigarettes that they won't get cancer, it's easier to do than to convince them to stop smoking cigarettes so someone else doesn't get cancer, or in this case, to stay at home so that you're protecting the most vulnerable.
Yeah, I do think there's
hope in that. I know you have to counter it with the studies showing that vulnerable populations, we were talking earlier, African Americans seem to be disproportionately hit. But is there?
Well, African Americans are disproportionately hit, not because we're African American, but because we exist in a system that has created disparate risk levels, right? Some of that's vocation, some of it's education, some of it's access to healthcare, some of it is racism. So that's a little bit complicated, but I would say that we have an opportunity to push our capital markets and economy to more fully consider commonwealth and togetherness than we ever have in the past, right? What I'm hearing and what I've been hearing over the last 10 years in Portland is finally coming together. In 2011, we heard young people in the Occupy movement say, hey, you're extracting too much from us, right? A few years later, people started to say the rent is too damn high, which is another way of saying too much of the wealth that we're creating is going to equity capital. We hear women saying we want equal pay. And now we have this horrible disproportionate impact for certain parts of the population, which is another way of extracting wealth from Black people. Shorter lifespan is a way of wealth taking. And when you put all those things together, what I think the transformation that's happening is that we're saying equity capital cannot take all the gains. Human capital has to get some of it. Natural capital has to retain some of it. There are all these other forms of capital, and equity capital, as represented by people who do the work that I do, has been taking too much. And we're having this conversation about what that, what the outcome will be, what the end state will be. And I think that we're having a pretty serious discussion about our economic future. And lots of people, new networks of power, and organizations are challenging old networks of power and saying, we want to change this a little bit. Not that we want to kill you, but you can't keep extracting wealth with equity capital. You've got to leave some in or share it in other ways. And I'm not sure how that will play out for people in my position. I think it starts with us beginning to talk about housing, not as an equity, but as a bond, so that we expect something different out of investing in residential housing in particular. I think it starts to make us think deeply about equal pay for women, because that is what supports family. I think it will get us to think seriously about how we can have growth, but have it not be extracted in the form of wealth for equity holders. So I'm noodling on what this means and how it will play out 15, 20 years from now. I don't think we'll see the results in 2 or 3 years, but something profound is happening.
We're about out of time. I've got 2 quick questions and I'm going to change gears, more personal. What, if anything, have you learned about yourself from this shelter in place?
I like people. So much of my inspiration in investing comes from being in crowds of people, what people are wearing, how they paint their faces creatively. I like walking through downtown Portland and looking at the art galleries through the windows. I miss that. And being in this kind of sanitary room, trying to think about how to invest capital for 20, 30 years, I'm missing the inspiration from the street a lot.
All right,
So
good
I've
answer.
learned that about myself. And I like sunflower seeds.